Hands That Heal. Chapter 1. The Woman with the Clipboard. The morning had started like most others, running 10 minutes behind, her daughter's homework mysteriously missing from the kitchen table, and the cat vomiting next to Mona's only clean pair of work shoes. She'd laughed. Not a bitter laugh, but the kind that comes from knowing you'll either lose your mind or lean into the madness.
If this story is already tugging at something in you, hit that subscribe button. We share real, raw, and inspiring stories every week, the kind that stay with you long after the video ends. So if you're into heartfelt journeys and gentle breakthroughs, you're in the right place.
Mona Gray had always been the leaning in type. She dropped Lily off at school with a lunch she barely remembered packing and pulled into her massage studio parking space with 2 minutes to spare. The diffuser was already misting eucalyptus into the air by the time her first client arrived. A weary kindergarten teacher with a crick in her neck and a tired apology. "It's okay," Mona had said, her hands already working, voice soft but sure. "You're here, that's enough." By noon, she'd worked on 3 bodies and shouldered at least a week's worth of emotional debris from other people's lives. She loved her job deeply. But lately, even the healing work felt like a weight. In the quiet moments between sessions, she sat in her office with a cup of chamomile and stared at the corkboard above her desk. It held her vision board, scraps of paper with scribbled dreams, time, freedom, travel to Italy, more rest, a man who doesn't need rescuing. She smiled at that last one. That particular dream had felt a little more possible when Marie Jensen entered her life. They met 6 months ago at church after Mona had volunteered to set up chairs for a women's event. Marie had walked in with arms full of flowers and a mouth full of sass. "You're the one with the magic hands, right?" Marie asked, plopping roses into a vase like she was conducting an orchestra. "We've got half the prayer chain talking about your massages." Mona laughed. "I guess so." "I'm Marie," she said, grabbing Mona's hand with both of hers. "And you've got the kind of energy that makes a person feel like they've known you forever. I like that." They hit it off instantly. Marie was fire and tenderness, comedy and comfort. The kind of woman Mona had always wished her own mother could be. "I've got a son," Marie said after their 3rd coffee together. "Smart as a whip, runs his own tech company, single, handsome, stubborn as an ox. You'd love him." Mona laughed it off. "I'm not looking, Marie." "You're allowed to look and live," Marie said. "Your heart's still beating, isn't it?" It was, but barely, some days. Still, Mona had dodged every attempt Marie made to introduce them. She wasn't ready, not for someone else's baggage, not for the possibility of falling again. Not after Lily's dad. She didn't talk about him often. They'd had passion, sure, but passion without consistency becomes chaos. Mona had tried for years to hold everything together, to soften his temper, excuse the broken promises, protect Lily from the fallout. She'd finally left when she realized her daughter had started apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Now, it was just the 2 of them. Mona and Lily. Healing slowly. Building a life on a foundation of enough. That afternoon, her final client of the day canceled, leaving a rare, hour-wide hole in her calendar. She should have eaten, or meditated, or journaled. Instead, she pulled out her laptop and opened a spreadsheet she hadn't touched in a year. Career pivot ideas. Her wrists had been aching more lately. A sign, maybe. Or just overuse. She loved massage, but she needed something in addition. Something where she could still help people, but not with her body. Something where she could create calm with systems and words instead of hands and oils. She was still daydreaming when her phone buzzed. New client, Jeff Jensen, referred by Dr. Renee. She clicked open the intake form. Tech guy, Stressed, needs help managing pain, refusing medication. Sounds like Marie's stubborn son in a nutshell. Mona froze. Jensen? Number it couldn't be. Jensen was a common name. Probably. She exhaled, shook her head, and typed a confirmation text. The next morning, as she set up the room for her newest client, Mona glanced once more at her vision board. More rest. More joy. No rescuing. Breathe first. And yet, something told her this appointment might not be like the others. She wasn't nervous, but she was curious. She didn't know yet that her clipboard would soon be traded for a desk, or that the man walking through her door, grumbling about being forced into massage therapy, would unravel her carefully guarded piece and slowly, lovingly stitch it back together. She didn't know she'd fall, not back into old patterns, but forward, into something brave. Chapter 2. Wires and Worry Lines. He arrived 5 minutes late with a coffee in one hand, a phone in the other, and a sling that looked like it had been applied in a hurry by someone watching a YouTube tutorial. Jeff Jensen. Mona took one look at him and knew two things immediately. This was absolutely Marie's son. He didn't want to be here. Hi, he said, scanning the lobby like he was expecting a secret exit door. Jeff Jensen, you probably guessed. I did, Mona said warmly. Come on back, Jeff. His energy filled the room before he even crossed the threshold, intense, bristling with a kind of low-grade panic disguised as efficiency. Mona had seen it before, in herself, even. The need to control everything because somewhere deep down, you believed no one else would catch the pieces when they fell. She motioned to the table. Make yourself comfortable, whatever that means for you today. He glanced at the table like it might bite. Never done this before. That's okay, she said. We'll go slow, and with the arm, I'll just work around the tension, not into it. He looked at her for a beat, skeptical, tired, guarded. Then he exhaled. Okay. 20 minutes in, she could already tell his whole body was wired for battle. Not physical battle, tech battles, email wars, client fires, overloaded calendars, and tight deadlines. His traps were boulders. His jaw barely moved when she asked if the pressure was okay. You don't relax easily, she said gently. I don't really do relaxing, he muttered into the table. Well, she replied, pressing gently into the space between his shoulder blades. You're here now, and I won't tell anyone if you accidentally enjoy it. To her surprise, he chuckled. The sound was low, unsure. Progress. About halfway through, Jeff's defenses started to slip. Sometimes, when a body starts to unwind, the mouth follows. Mona knew better than to pry. But if they opened up, she listened. He talked about his business, Dark Horse IT, which he built from scratch after his wife left. She took the bartending job, met an oil guy, and decided North Dakota wasn't enough for her, he said. She left me and our son with the business, the bills, and half a bottle of cheap tequila. Mona stayed quiet, hands moving in long strokes down his back. I didn't have time to fall apart, he added. Had a 5-year-old looking at me like I was the only thing keeping his world upright. She nodded, unseen. So you became the thing. Yeah, I did. There it was. The quiet grief of a man who built a wall to protect his son and forgot to leave a door for himself. Mona had known that role. Different details, same muscle. By the time the session ended, his jaw had loosened, and his voice had dropped an octave. Not sleepy, just unarmored. How do people do this regularly? He asked, rolling his shoulder. I feel half drunk. It's called regulation, Mona said with a smile. Your nervous system is finally getting the memo. He sat up slowly, his sling shifting awkwardly. You do this to everyone? Only the ones brave enough to let go. He looked at her then, really looked. And Mona, to her surprise, felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the quiet dignity of a man who hadn't fallen apart even when he had every reason to. He paid, scheduled another appointment for the following week, and walked out without looking back. Mona stood alone in the dim room, her hands tingling slightly from the work, her heart a little louder than usual. That evening, after Lily went to bed, Mona sat at her kitchen table with a cup of mint tea, staring at a sticky note she'd scribbled earlier. Career shift? Maybe? Virtual admin again? Still help people, just differently? Jeff's name danced in her mind, though she didn't write it down. She didn't need another fixer-upper project. She wasn't looking for anyone to save. But she couldn't shake the feeling she'd just met someone worth watching, and maybe, just maybe, someone worth building with. Chapter 3: The Oxygen Mask Rule. The next 2 sessions with Jeff felt different, not because of what he said, though he was talking more, but because of what he didn't say. There were long silences, punctuated by the soft sounds of breath and her hands working through muscle and memory. Each time, he left a little looser, a little less guarded. But Mona could feel it rising in him, the unravel. She'd seen it before, always in men like Jeff, men who wore competence like armor, men who carried shame like currency. By the 3rd appointment, when he mentioned having triple booked himself again, 3 clients, same afternoon, 1 truck, she caught herself saying the words before she thought them through. You know, I could help with that. Scheduling, admin. I've done it before. Jeff had gone quiet for a full 5 seconds. Then, really? And there it was. The moment she had promised herself wouldn't come. That night, Mona lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan above her bed, listening to Lily's soft breathing in the next room. You offered. You crossed the line. She knew better. Knew how easy it was for her to jump in, to rescue, to overextend herself into someone else's chaos and call it kindness. She'd been doing it since she was 9, when her mom started forgetting to pay the water bill, when her little sisters looked to her like she had answers, when the whole house felt like it would crack apart if Mona didn't hold it all together. That was the thing about being the strong one. People let you. And they never checked if it was killing you in the process. She got up, padded barefoot into the kitchen, and made tea. Sat at the table and pulled out her notebook, the one with the cover that read, "Put your own mask on first." She'd bought it after her divorce, written in it every time she felt that old pull to abandon herself for someone else's crisis. She flipped to a blank page. Pro-con, helping Jeff with admin work. Pro, he genuinely needs help. I'm good at this kind of thing. It could be part-time, flexible. I like being around him. I need to scale back massage anyway. Con, boundary blur. He's intense. I promised myself no more fixer projects. What if I end up carrying him? She tapped the pen against her lip, then added neutral. What if this is something new? Not rescuing, not abandoning herself, just contributing, in a healthy way, to something good. She sat back and exhaled. Maybe the issue wasn't Jeff. Maybe the issue was trusting herself. When she showed up at his office the next afternoon to check out the space, she knew she'd made the right call. It was chaos, organized in a way that only made sense to Jeff, if at all. Post-its everywhere. A whiteboard half filled with chicken scratch tech jargon. A schedule on the wall that clearly hadn't been updated since January. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Jeff looked sheepish as he gestured to the desk. "It's not much, but I figured if you want to take a swing at it." She looked around, took a slow breath, and smiled. "I've untangled worse." That week, she started with 5 hours, just sorting, rearranging, creating a digital calendar, and syncing it to his phone. Cleaning up the voicemail inbox, which had 74 unheard messages, 27 of which were from the same frazzled dentist. By Friday, Mona had a color-coded weekly schedule on the wall and 3 recurring client billing issues resolved. By Friday, Jeff had breathed. She noticed the shift in his shoulders, the way he smiled more, the way his son, Parker, had shown up one afternoon after school and immediately offered her a Capri Sun from his backpack, because grown-ups don't drink enough juice. Mona had laughed, then blinked back tears in the bathroom. She didn't want to fall for this life. Didn't want to be needed. But maybe, just maybe, she was no longer falling. Maybe she was choosing. That weekend, at church, Marie found her in the coffee line. "Something's different about you," she said, squinting. "You look lifted." Mona smiled. "Just a new rhythm." Marie nudged her. "I've been praying my son would meet someone who could see through the stubborn. I think it might be working." Mona sipped her coffee slowly, carefully. "Marie, what's your son's name again?" "Jeff," she said, beaming. Mona nearly dropped her cup. "Oh," Marie added. "And that boy of his? The light of my life. Parker." Mona stared at her, stunned. She hadn't 100% put it together. Jeff never mentioned his mom by name. She'd imagined that Jeff was Marie's son, but until this moment she still thought maybe it was her imagination. Marie laughed, misreading her silence. "What? You didn't think someone like me could raise someone like him?" "No," Mona said quickly. "I just didn't realize how small the world was." Marie grinned. "I told you he was special. You're just seeing it now." Mona smiled, heart thudding. "Oh," Marie added with a wink. "And I already consider you family. You might as well catch up." Mona laughed all the way home. This town, this life, this unfolding. Maybe, just maybe, putting on her own oxygen mask wasn't selfish. Maybe it was what gave her the strength to finally breathe into something beautiful. Chapter 4. Boxes and Boundaries. Mona didn't believe in saviors anymore, not the tall, dark, handsome kind, and certainly not the type who ran a tech company with a desk full of tangled cords and expired post-its. But she did believe in rhythm. And by the 3rd week of working part-time at Dark Horse IT, she and Jeff had found one. She showed up with her tea, organized his mess, gently corrected his double bookings, and added recurring client reminders to his Google Calendar like it was a love language. Jeff resisted at first, grumbled about systems killing creativity. But then he stopped missing appointments. And that was the thing about Jeff. Once he saw something worked, he leaned in. He wasn't lazy, just scared. And Mona knew fear, intimately. The turning point came on a Monday morning when Jeff walked into the office, juggling his laptop, a breakfast sandwich, and Parker's forgotten gym shoes. His casted arm still limited him, but his tone was lighter. "You're early," she said, glancing up from her screen. "Had to drop off a kid, a router, and my sanity before 9 a.m. She smiled. "Welcome to modern fatherhood." Jeff set down his laptop. "I just got off the phone with the radio producer. They want me back for a regular tech segment." "That's amazing," Mona said. "When?" He hesitated. "They want to record weekly, Friday mornings, which is also when I'm supposed to be at 2 client sites and checking inventory. He looked at her, brow furrowed. She waited. Then he asked it. Can you help me figure this out? The simple request, so uncharacteristic of him, took her breath for half a second. Yes, she said, already pulling up the shared calendar. He exhaled like a man finally letting himself share the weight. By that afternoon, she'd solved the conflict, delegated the Friday inventory check to Eli, and created a content planning doc for the radio segments. Jeff didn't ask for it, she just did it, because this was her sweet spot. Not just massage therapy, not just healing tired muscles and exhausted spirits, but bringing order to chaos, creating calm, making room for people to breathe. Jeff saw that, and that's what scared her, because when people saw her, they usually wanted more than she could give. They wanted her to fix everything, to keep showing up until she ran out of herself entirely. But Jeff, he didn't ask for more. He just said, "Thank you." And that was new. That evening, she picked Lily up from piano and swung by the co-op for groceries. As they walked past the bulk bins, Lily asked, "Do you like your new job?" Mona smiled. "I do." "Do you like Jeff?" Mona blinked. "Why?" Lily shrugged. "You talk about him the way you used to talk about massage, like it matters, and you smile weird when you say his name." Mona tried not to laugh. "I smile weird?" "Like, soft. Not your customer smile, your real one. Leave it to a kid to cut through everything." She didn't want to blur boundaries. Didn't want to fall into a rhythm that couldn't hold. But the way Jeff looked at her now, like she was a lighthouse, not a lifeboat, made something flutter in her. It wasn't about being needed. It was about being trusted. And even though she wasn't sure she was ready, she felt her heart stepping towards something it had long forgotten how to want. 2 days later, they shared lunch at the office. Takeout from the Thai place Jeff swore had life-altering spring rolls. They talked about their kids, about podcasts, about bad coffee, and worse clients. Then, between bites, Jeff said something that caught her completely off guard. "You make things feel doable." Mona looked up. "That sounds stupid," he added quickly. "I just mean, when you're here, it's like my brain doesn't have to panic about everything at once." She studied him for a long second. "You don't sound stupid." He gave a half smile. "I think Marie's trying to work some matchmaking voodoo through you. She keeps dropping hints." Mona choked on her spring roll. "She has mentioned you." "Oh?" He leaned forward, curious. "She told me once she had a stubborn son who ran on black coffee and bad judgment. I figured it was just small-town mom pride." Jeff laughed. "Well, she's not wrong." Mona smiled, trying to ignore the warmth spreading in her chest. "I didn't know she was your Marie until last week," she said. "She told me she already considers me family." Jeff raised an eyebrow. "She moves fast. She's got good instincts." He looked at her, the joking faded now, something steadier in his gaze. "So do you." That night, after Lily went to bed, Mona sat on the porch with her journal in her lap and the early spring breeze brushing against her face. She flipped to a page she hadn't touched in months, titled, "Things I Want But Don't Say Out Loud." She read through the old list. Some items made her smile. Some made her ache. Then she added a new one, "A life I don't have to recover from." And underneath that, a second line, "A man who builds something with me, not on my back." She stared at the words, then closed the journal, hands resting gently on top. She didn't know where this was going. But she wasn't scared. Because this time, she was choosing it with both feet on the ground. Chapter 5. Cracks in the Armor. It started like any other Thursday. Mona arrived at the office early, a coffee in one hand and a stack of printer paper balanced on her hip. She liked the silence of the mornings there, the quiet hum of systems waiting to wake up, the smell of old wires and strong coffee. It felt like possibility. Jeff showed up 20 minutes later, hair still damp from a shower, dark t-shirt slightly wrinkled, cast now signed by Parker in bubble letters that read, "Best Dad, mostly." "Traffic?" she teased as he dropped his bag beside his desk. "Kid forgot his trombone. Again, had to double back." She grinned. "Classic. At least he's committed to the arts." Jeff groaned and dropped into his chair. "This week's a monster. 3 installs, the radio segment, and I've still got that quote to finish for the clinic downtown." "You're going to burn out again if you don't slow down?" "I've got help." She raised an eyebrow. "You have help, but you still insist on carrying half of it yourself." He didn't respond, just rubbed his temple with his good hand. She walked over, gently nudging his coffee closer to him. "I'm serious, Jeff. You're stretched thin. It's okay to let people carry things with you. That's not failure. It's wisdom." He looked up at her then. Really looked. "I'm trying," he said. "It's just, it still feels like if I let go too much, everything will collapse." Mona softened. "Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll finally grow." That night, after closing up, she lingered in the office while Jeff checked on a router update. It was snowing outside again. April in Fargo, winter refusing to leave quietly. Jeff returned from the back room, his hair dusted with insulation from the ceiling tiles. "Please tell me you're not still crawling around in attics." "I was being careful." "You have a broken arm." "It's not broken anymore," he said, holding it up like a trophy. Mona crossed her arms. "And yet, you have 3 people on payroll who could have done it." He sighed, dropping into the desk chair with a wince. "I don't know how to stop fixing everything myself." She sat across from him, voice soft now. "Maybe stop thinking of delegation as giving up control, and start thinking of it as giving yourself room." He was quiet for a long time. Then, almost under his breath, "I don't know who I am if I'm not saving something." Mona felt those words in her chest like a bell. "I used to feel that way too," she whispered. "My mom drank. My sisters needed a mom more than a sister. I learned how to carry everyone, how to fix things. I didn't even know I was allowed to stop." Jeff looked at her then, something raw in his eyes. "What changed?" "I got tired," she said. "And I watched Lily start doing the same thing I did. Apologizing when she hadn't done anything wrong, smiling so I wouldn't worry." She blinked fast. "I knew if I didn't start breathing for myself, I'd pass out trying to save her." Jeff reached across the desk, his hand brushing hers. "Thank you for being honest." She looked down at their fingers, didn't pull away. "You know," she said quietly, "you don't always have to be the hero. Sometimes just showing up is enough." He was about to respond when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and winced. "Warehouse job. They're having connection issues. It's a quick fix. I'll be right back." Mona stood. "You sure?" He flashed a grin. "Always." And then he was gone. He didn't come back that night. The phone call came 2 hours later. She was at home, curled up on the couch, a rerun humming softly in the background, when the screen lit up. Marie Jensen. "Mona," Marie said, voice shaking. "Jeff fell." ladder slipped at a client's, broke his arm again. They're at the ER now. Mona stood so fast the blanket fell to the floor. Oh my God, is he okay? He will be. It's bad, but not life-threatening. I'm here with Parker. Can you... I'm coming. The hospital room was too bright. Jeff looked pale but lucid, his new cast still damp with marker lines from Parker's attempts to cheer him up. Mona stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. He looked up, smiled weakly. Guess I'm back to being the one-armed bandit. She walked to his bedside. What were you thinking? I wasn't, he admitted. I just didn't want to let the client down. She shook her head. You've got to stop doing everything yourself, Jeff. I know. Do you? He nodded slowly, wincing. I do. I just don't know how. Mona took his hand. You're not alone anymore, she said. You don't have to know how. We'll figure it out. He closed his eyes for a second, breathing her in. Marie told me she tried to introduce us ages ago, he said quietly. Mona smiled. She tried. Why'd you dodge it? She met his gaze. Because I didn't want to fall for someone I'd have to fix. He flinched slightly. But you, she added, you don't need fixing, you just need rest. He nodded, and for the first time since she'd met him, Mona saw it. The armor cracked, the hero disarmed, the man real.
Still with us? This is the kind of story we share every week. Hit subscribe to follow along.
Chapter 6. Bruised and Unraveling. The office was too quiet without Jeff. Mona stood in front of the desk on Monday morning, holding a mug of coffee and staring at the mess he usually created in the first 15 minutes of the day. Backpack dropped in the corner, empty energy drink on the windowsill, a phone charging on the floor next to his chair because desks are overrated. But today, none of it. Just the faint hum of the server rack and the quiet realization that she was now holding it all together. Jared and Eli showed up on time, wide-eyed but ready. Shauna called in early to confirm her shift and brought donuts, nervous energy in pastry form. Everyone wanted to prove something. They just weren't sure to whom. Mona took a breath, held it, released it. Then she picked up the clipboard. All right, she said. Let's get to work. The first few days were chaos. Tame, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Jeff was texting from his couch in bursts of left-handed frustration, spelling errors and all. Client and unhappy with router. Check if Eli plugged in both ports. Remind Jared firewall, not autosaving. You're amazing. Thank you for not running. She replied with calm updates and occasional sarcasm. It kept them both sane. What she didn't tell him was that she was barely keeping her own head above water. Lily's school was doing some weird custody policy review. Her ex had texted again. Marie offered to babysit, but Mona felt guilty accepting too often. Her own body ached. Not from massages this time, but from long hours at the desk, juggling Jeff's business, her child's emotions, and her own rising fear. Because it was happening again. The overfunctioning, the overgiving. That quiet voice in her chest whispering, "Be careful. You've been here before." But the difference this time? Jeff noticed. Are you sleeping? He asked one evening, voice tired but sincere through the speakerphone. Sometimes. You need to rest too, Mona. Don't burn out because of me. She sat on the couch, curling her legs beneath her. I'm okay, she said, which wasn't a lie, but wasn't the full truth either. You've done more for this business in a week than I have in months, he said. I'm scared you're going to realize you can do it without me. She laughed softly. I don't want to do it without you. There was a pause. Then, me either. Later that night, Mona sat in her bedroom, watching Lily draw at her desk. Did Jeff get hurt bad? Lily asked. Bad enough to need help. Are you helping him because you like him? Mona hesitated. I'm helping him because I care. Same thing, Lily said without looking up. Are we going to see him more? Mona felt the tug in her chest, equal parts joy and fear. I think so. Okay, Lily said, coloring in a bright orange sun. I like him. He talks to me like I'm not just a kid. Mona smiled. Yeah, he does that. Friday morning, Mona walked into the office and stopped cold. There, on the front desk, was a small bouquet of daisies in a mason jar and a note in Jeff's crooked handwriting. Thank you for being the hands I can't use, the brain I can't overthink, and the heart I'm slowly trusting. Jay. She sat down hard, not because she was surprised, but because he saw her. Not as a helper, not as an employee, but as a person, a partner. And for someone who had spent most of her life being invisible outside her usefulness, that meant everything. That afternoon, Parker came to the office after school. He ran in with his backpack swinging, waved to Eli, and beelined to Mona's desk. Dad said you're in charge now, he said, sliding into the chair across from her. Temporarily. He leaned forward like he was telling a secret. I think you should just stay in charge. She raised an eyebrow. Why's that? Because everything works when you're here, and my dad smiles more, and you bring snacks? Mona laughed, her throat tight. I'll take that under consideration. That weekend, Jeff invited her and Lily over for dinner. He couldn't cook with one arm, so he ordered Thai and set the table like it was a 4-star restaurant. Paper napkins folded into triangles, candles slightly too tall for the setting, Parker's scribbled name cards at each plate. It was imperfect. It was perfect. They ate, laughed, talked about nothing and everything. And after the kids went to bed, Lily on the air mattress in Parker's room, they sat on the porch, Jeff's cast resting on a pillow, Mona curled beside him under a blanket. I don't want to ruin this, he said quietly. You're not. I've never let anyone in like this. Not since. I know. They sat in silence, letting the words hang. Then Mona whispered, You're not the only one learning how to be loved without being useful. He turned to her, eyes wide. I see you, she said. And then, finally, he kissed her. Software slow, no urgency, just presence. Mona felt the last of the walls drop, not because she was losing herself, but because she was found. Chapter 7. Mona had always believed children were truth-tellers, not because they knew everything, but because they lacked the filter to pretend. That's why she noticed when Lily's laughter changed. It wasn't just at Jeff's jokes or Parker's ridiculous dance moves. It was lighter, unburdened, the kind of sound she hadn't heard since before the divorce, back when the world still felt like it had guardrails. That's what scared her. Because joy felt risky. It started with a school project. Family Traditions Week. Parker invited Lily over for dinner and asked if she could help him make paper chains for the family tree poster. Mom says you're basically part of our team now, he told Mona matter-of-factly. So that counts. Lily beamed. Mona said yes before she could overthink it. They spent the evening sitting on the carpet, surrounded by paper scraps, glue sticks, and chocolate chip cookies Marie had dropped off with strict instructions to eat the whole batch or else. Parker wrote family names on strips of construction paper, carefully linking them one by one. Lily watched him, quiet. "Do I get a chain too?" she asked after a while. Parker looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "Duh, you're part of it." He handed her a marker and a yellow strip of paper. "Write your name." Lily hesitated, then wrote Lily in large, wobbly letters. Parker linked her paper between his and Jeff's. No ceremony, no fuss. Just inclusion. Mona blinked back tears as she watched them. No one had ever made it that simple for her, growing up. Family was something you earned through endurance and sacrifice. But here, it was something you got invited into. After the kids fell asleep, Parker in his bunk bed, Lily on the couch wrapped in a fuzzy blanket, Mona sat across from Jeff at the kitchen table. They sipped tea in silence. "I saw the chain," he said quietly. She didn't even ask if it was okay. She just assumed she belonged. "She does." Mona looked at him. "It scares me how much sense this all makes." Jeff nodded. "Me too." "I've never had anything work this easily," she admitted, "and part of me keeps waiting for the shoe to drop." Jeff chuckled. "Want to know a secret?" "Always." "I almost didn't hire you." She raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I thought letting someone into my schedule would kill me. I thought asking for help would make me less." He looked at her. "But you didn't just help. You built something. You made space for me to breathe." She was quiet, letting the words settle. "You did the same for me," she said. "But I'm still afraid I'll lose myself. I don't know how to be part of someone's life without absorbing it completely." Jeff reached across the table, palm up. "I won't let that happen." She took his hand, held it, believed him. The next day, Mona walked into the office early to find Jared and Eli already troubleshooting a printer issue. Shauna was in the corner, testing out a new onboarding form she'd mocked up on her own. Everything was running, without Jeff, without Mona hovering. She blinked. It's working. Not just the business, the life around it. It was functioning because she wasn't holding it all together. She was contributing, not carrying. And for the first time, she felt the difference. Later that week, Jeff surprised her with a gift, a brand new office chair. "I noticed you've been using that folding chair from 2003, he said, trying not to look nervous. "Figured it was time you got a throne." Mona laughed. "This isn't a throne." He shrugged. "You built the kingdom. Figured it was the least I could do." She sat down in it, spinning once like a kid, and then looked up at him. "You're getting better at this?" "At what?" "Letting people in." He smiled. "Only the ones who never asked to be the hero." That night, Mona journaled again. She wrote about the paper chain, about Jeff's hands, about Parker's easy inclusion and Lily's sudden glow. She wrote something that made her pause. "I'm not losing myself in this. I'm finding new pieces." Not because she needed Jeff, but because she'd finally chosen herself first, and in doing so, found someone who loved the version of her that wasn't defined by sacrifice. The next morning, as she unlocked the office door, she noticed something taped to the inside window. It was a drawing. Lily and Parker had made it together. Marker people with wild hair and big smiles. Underneath, in crayon block letters, Team Dark Horse, powered by Mona. She laughed, out loud, and walked inside. Ready. Chapter 8. A Real Date. "You need a real date," Marie announced one Sunday afternoon as she handed Mona a slice of rhubarb pie. Mona blinked. "I'm sorry?" "A real one," Marie said, tapping the table for emphasis. "Not Thai takeout at the kitchen counter while the kids watch Minecraft videos. Something with a dress. Maybe some eye contact." Mona laughed. "We've been busy." "You've been scared." Mona opened her mouth to argue, closed it again. Marie raised an eyebrow and slid the pie across the table like it was evidence. "You like him," she said. "He likes you. Don't let life turn it into a convenience store romance." Mona smiled, biting into the flaky crust. Marie was bossy, and she was right. She brought it up that evening, cautiously. "You know, your mom says we need a real date." Jeff was leaning over the kitchen counter, trying to open a jar of salsa with one good hand and his elbow. He paused, cast resting awkwardly on the counter. "She did, huh? Said we're dangerously close to becoming Costco married." He chuckled. "That sounds like her." Mona raised an eyebrow. "So?" He looked up. "I'd love a real date." They settled on Friday. Marie volunteered to watch the kids. No arguments allowed. Jeff borrowed Eli's car so Mona wouldn't have to drive both ways. And Mona? She wore a dress. Not a fancy one, but soft and midnight blue. One she hadn't worn since her sister's wedding and almost didn't recognize in the mirror. Jeff stood a little stunned when she opened the door. "Wow." She smiled. "You clean up pretty good yourself." "Don't get used to it," he said. "I'm still a jeans and router kind of guy." "Good," she replied, grabbing her clutch. "I like routers." They went to a small restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a florist downtown. One of those places with too many candles and 3 specials written in chalk on a wall nobody looked at. Mona tried not to feel nervous, but there was something terrifying about being seen this clearly. Jeff didn't just look at her. He noticed. He asked about Lily's latest drawing, remembered that she used to do admin work before massage, recalled the exact tea she liked, and asked if her shoulder had been bothering her again. It wasn't grand. It was intimate. Real. Over dinner, he asked the question she didn't know she was waiting for. "What do you want next?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "From this. From me. From life." She sat with it, fork resting against her plate. "No one's asked me that in a long time?" He waited. She took a breath. "I want to work without breaking, to love without bleeding, to raise my daughter in a home that doesn't need apologies just for being quiet. And maybe I want to build something that lasts, not just a business, something with roots." Jeff nodded slowly. "I want that too." Their eyes met. It wasn't a promise. It was a knowing. After dinner, they walked along the river downtown, the sidewalk slick with spring thaw and lit by antique street lamps. Jeff paused near the old metal bridge and turned to her. "I didn't know I could have this," he said. "This?" Something that felt like peace. Mona swallowed the lump in her throat. "You've always been allowed to." He looked down at her, hand brushing hers. "I just didn't know how." "You're learning." They stood there, in the quiet wind, and something unspoken passed between them. Not urgency, not need, just rightness. Later, when he dropped her off, he didn't lean in too fast. He stood on the front step, hand in his pocket, cast awkwardly cradled against his ribs. "Tonight was the best part of my year," he said simply. Mona smiled. "Mine too." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like to do it again, with you, for a long time." She reached up, gently kissed his cheek. "I'd like that, Jeff." Inside, she leaned against the door for a moment, heart thudding in quiet disbelief. She wasn't falling into something this time. She was walking in, with her eyes open. And for the first time in forever, she didn't want to run. Across town, Jeff climbed into bed, looked at his busted arm, and laughed. Because somehow, breaking everything had led to healing more than he ever expected. And this time, he wasn't doing it alone. Chapter 9: Systems, Surprises, and the Soft Stuff. "You know," Jeff said, resting his cast on a pillow as he watched Mona reorganize a stack of invoices, "I think I'm finally ready to give up." Mona glanced over, smirking. "That was abrupt. You okay?" "Yeah," he said, grinning. "I mean, give up control. Not everything." She laughed. "Took a broken arm and a small army to get you here." He leaned back, sighing happily. And one Mona. The truth was, things were working. Jared and Eli were thriving under clear SOPs that Mona helped create. Shauna had stepped up into a project coordinator role without being asked. Mona had built a full client management dashboard that tracked follow-ups, invoices, hardware warranties, and contract renewals. Jeff, for the first time in years, wasn't working in the business all day. He was working on it, and it was growing. Mona helped him hire a part-time bookkeeper. She'd started drafting client onboarding templates and even a welcome packet. Systems that didn't rely on Jeff remembering everything, which meant more white space in his day, more energy for Parker, more actual sleep, and more time with her. "You know," he said one afternoon, spinning slowly in her office chair while she labeled file folders, "you're kind of my operations angel." She paused. "Excuse me?" "You swooped in, fixed everything, made order out of chaos." "I didn't swoop, I strategized." He leaned over dramatically. "Same thing. I was drowning. You didn't just throw me a rope, you built me a damn boat." She rolled her eyes. "You built it. I just organized the parts." Then his tone shifted. "You really changed my life, Mona." She looked at him, surprised by the weight in his voice. "And not just at the office," he added. "You helped me stop seeing asking for help as weakness." She swallowed. "I needed to hear that." "Why?" "Because for a long time, I only felt valuable if I was saving someone." They sat in silence for a moment, that kind of quiet that feels like truth echoing through the room. Then Jeff stood, walked over, and kissed her gently. "Now we're saving each other," he said. That weekend, he surprised her with a gift, a half-day off-site retreat for just the two of them. "A what?" Mona said, laughing. "It's professional," he assured her. "Strategic planning, with snacks and wine." They drove out to a little Airbnb cottage Marie found on the edge of town. It had Wi-Fi, a fireplace, and a porch swing that faced an endless field of snow-glittered prairie. Inside, Jeff laid out a giant whiteboard, Post-it notes, and a playlist titled CEO Vibes. Mona snorted. "You are such a nerd." He bowed. "Thank you." They spent the first hour mapping business goals, growth projections, staff promotions, quarterly themes. Then, without planning to, they shifted. Talked about family rhythms, what blending their two worlds might look like. Parker's obsession with robotics, Lily's latest watercolor streak, school carpools and summer road trips. It stopped being planning. It started being dreaming. After a break for snacks, cheese, crackers, and peanut M&Ms, Jeff reached into his bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. I got you something. Why? Because you don't ask for anything, and you deserve to be celebrated. Inside the paper was a tiny silver charm, an open book etched with the words, "Your story matters." Mona stared at it, heart tight. I saw it at a craft fair last weekend, he said. It made me think of how you show up. For your daughter. For me. For yourself. She blinked back tears. It's small, he said, suddenly nervous. I just thought maybe you'd like it. I love it, she said, her voice thick. And she did. Not because of what it was, but because it reminded her that she was being seen. They stayed in the cottage until sunset, sipping tea and talking like they had nowhere to be. On the drive back, Lily called. Are you coming home soon? She asked. Parker made spaghetti, but it's kind of crunchy. Mona laughed. We'll be home in 20. You can sit next to Dad again, Parker yelled in the background. He saved you a spot. Mona caught Jeff's eye across the console. They smiled at each other. She clicked off speaker. You okay with this? She asked. With what? Becoming a family? He didn't hesitate. Mona, I already feel like I have one. When they got home, the kids had set the table. Paper napkins, lit candles, and a sign that read, Welcome back, bosses. Parker wore a chef's apron. Lily held up a clipboard. We created a system, she said proudly. Dinner planning, weekly chores, and Parker's new rule, no crunchy spaghetti unless it's on purpose. Mona laughed until her cheeks hurt. Jeff gave her a look that said, See what we're building. And she knew. This wasn't chaos. This was order. Love. Possibility. Built not from control, but from trust. Chapter 10. One Step Closer. Spring hit Fargo like a held breath finally exhaled. The snow melted. The streets glistened. And Mona's porch plants, long dormant in their cracked terracotta pots, stretched toward the sun with reckless faith. Everything was blooming, including her life. At work, systems had taken root. Jeff had officially handed off half his client management load, and Shauna was now confidently scheduling texts without consulting him first. Mona watched the shift with quiet pride. Jeff didn't hover anymore, didn't double-check everyone's work, didn't panic when someone else held the keys. It was like watching someone exhale after years of bracing for impact. One afternoon, while Jared updated the company wiki and Shauna trained a new intern, Jeff leaned against Mona's desk and said, I think I'm ready to take a whole day off. She blinked. A day? He nodded, almost shy. With you. They picked Saturday. The weather was soft. The kids were at Marie's. And the day stretched open like a promise. They drove to the old trails by the river, packed a picnic, and wandered with no agenda. Jeff's arm was fully healed now, the cast long gone, but he still reached for her hand like it was second nature. They stopped at a bench overlooking the water. Mona leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you ever get scared this is too good? She asked. All the time, Jeff said. But then I remember how hard we worked to get here. This didn't fall in our laps. We built it. She smiled. Yeah, we did. After lunch, he reached into the picnic basket and pulled out a small white box. Mona froze. Oh, she said, heart hammering. Jeff turned to her, eyes steady. It's not a ring, he said quickly. Not yet. I mean, not unless you want it to be. She blinked. Okay. He opened the box. Inside was a brass key. To what? He handed it to her. The office, the house, whatever we build next. She stared down at it, heart stuttering in her chest. It's just a symbol, he said, of trust, of partnership, of not doing any of this alone. Mona didn't speak. Couldn't, because it wasn't just a key. It was everything she'd been afraid to want. He reached for her hand. No pressure, he added. You don't have to move in or decide anything big. I just wanted you to know this door's open. She took the key, closed her fingers around it, and said quietly, That's the first time anyone's handed me a key without asking me to fix their whole life. Jeff's eyes softened. I'm not asking you to fix mine. I'm asking you to share it. They walked back in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was settled. Like two people who finally understood the weight of what they were carrying and had decided to carry it together. That evening, back at Mona's place, Lily and Parker were building a blanket fort in the living room. Marie sat on the couch with a root beer float and the remote. I didn't let them eat all the cookies, she said, but I made no promises about the chips. Mona leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Thank you, Marie. Marie smirked. You're welcome, future daughter-in-law. Mona blushed. Jeff nearly choked on his water. Parker popped out of the fort. You are gonna marry my dad, right? Lily gasped. Parker! Mona laughed. Easy, guys. Jeff turned to her. Well? She grinned. We're taking steps. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Mona stood in her bedroom holding the key. She placed it on her nightstand next to her journal, her favorite pen, and a photo of Lily as a toddler. Then she opened a fresh page and wrote, I never thought I'd get here, but here I am. Not just surviving, belonging. And just beneath it, in smaller handwriting, let's see what door opens next. Chapter 11, 1 year later. It had been exactly 364 days since Jeff broke his arm. Mona knew because she still had the sticky note Parker had written at the hospital. It read, No more ladders, Dad! With 3 exclamation points and a drawing of a stick figure wearing a cast. She kept it on the fridge like a badge of honor. So much had changed, and yet everything that mattered had deepened. Dark Horse IT now had a team of 7. A new office near downtown, a real receptionist desk, and an employee break room that Jeff proudly stocked with more than just beef jerky and energy drinks. They had quarterly strategy meetings now. Actual training videos, a system for onboarding that didn't involve Jeff frantically printing business cards 5 minutes before a client meeting. Mona didn't just organize things, she elevated them. And Jeff? He no longer carried it all alone. He even took Mondays off. Mondays. The man who once thought naps were for quitters now had a standing lunch date with Parker at their favorite burger spot, and a monthly massage with Mona, although they joked that only one of them walked out feeling truly relaxed. On the personal front, Mona still hadn't moved in officially, but most of her favorite mugs lived at Jeff's, and Lily's sketchbooks were scattered throughout both houses like breadcrumbs between 2 halves of a life that had finally begun to blend. They did family dinner every Friday, rotating between Marie's house, Jeff's place, and Mona's back patio. Sometimes they danced. Sometimes they argued over Uno rules. Sometimes they just sat. Together. Mona's massage practice still existed, but part-time now. She'd chosen fewer clients, more space, more presence. Because this wasn't about doing it all. It was about doing what mattered. Well, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel guilty for choosing rest. She felt wise. One afternoon in late spring, she found herself walking into the new office with an iced tea in one hand and a binder full of system upgrades in the other. Jeff was already inside, talking to Eli about a new managed services proposal. He looked up, saw her, and smiled like he still couldn't believe she'd said yes. She walked over, kissed his cheek, and handed him a sticky note Lily had drawn that morning. It was a crayon heart, inside of which read, "Thanks for loving my mom." He read it twice. Mona leaned in and whispered, "That goes both ways." That evening, they took the kids to the river trail and set up a small picnic on the same bench where Jeff had first given her the key. The kids played tag nearby while the adults sipped lemonade and watched the water slide past. Jeff turned to her, eyes soft. "You know," he said, "I still sometimes feel like I don't deserve this." Mona looked at him. "You don't," she said with a grin. "Not all of it." He laughed. "Fair." She took his hand. "But you worked for it. You changed. You let go." He squeezed her fingers. "So did you." They sat in the golden quiet, two people who had once been trying to prove themselves worthy of love, and now simply receiving it. Later that night, after baths and bedtime stories and one accidental pillow fight, Mona and Jeff stood on the porch watching the sky darken into stars. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't fallen off that ladder?" she asked. Jeff chuckled. "Honestly, I probably would have kept trying to do it all, alone." Mona nodded. "And I'd probably still be trying to fix everyone but myself." They stood there for a long moment. Then Jeff said, "You saved me." Mona shook her head, eyes shining. "No," she whispered. "We rescued each other." He pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. And there, under the starlit sky, with the smell of lilacs on the wind and the laughter of two children floating through an open window, Mona knew. She hadn't lost herself. She'd just finally come home.
If this story spoke to you, there's more where that came from. Go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this journey, or the next story that just might be yours in disguise. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.